21st Tarzana Comic-Con Film Festival. Today we have a special guest, Scott Tracy Griffin. He's a well-known author, and I think everybody in the Tarzan world by now knows his name. Welcome, Scott. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks a lot. Okay, we have a few questions. We just want to start talking. Obviously, we all know that the Tarzana Festival is inspired by the name Tarzan, which is coming from the district of Tarzana. But I just want to ask you, what everybody probably else asks, is how did you start, getting into the whole Tarzan thing? When it was the first time you heard about Tarzan, how did you get into this whole Tarzan arena?
Well, I discovered Tarzan through the Edgar Rice Burroughs books. I was 9 years old when I found them in a bookstore. I think everybody knows who Tarzan is just through that sort of cultural osmosis. So I was really sort of fascinated with the character. My brother had the Tarzan lunchbox that came out in the 60s. And there's this guy with a big knife. He was facing off against a gorilla on one side and a lion on the other. And exotic animals in Africa also fascinated me. So I think it was just natural that when I discovered the books, I started reading. I started the very first one, Tarzan of the Apes, and then I sort of skipped around. And then I went to the Mars series and everything. So definitely the books, the comic books, the movies, everything else came later. And in reading the books, I really became a big fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs, the writer. So I started studying the man. I got that Erwin Porges biography, the big 900-page one. I was 12 years old when I got that for my birthday and started reading that. So just a fascination with the whole world. Tarzan, John Carter of Mars, Edgar Rice Burroughs. It started in childhood and it just continued through adulthood.
Okay, nice. So that was almost like the Bible, those 900-page thing. But okay, yeah, and then also, well, obviously mentioned writing, but how did you you came into writing? I mean, obviously you started writing these amazing books. I mean, this is probably the best Tarzan books to me that captivates everything about Tarzan, and also this amazing book about the art of Tarzan, which I recommend to anybody. It's probably the best books that's covering the stories, the movies, the art. But apart from that, how did you start writing? I mean, did you thought in your mind after writing the Burroughs books that you wanted to cover the whole Tarzan thing, or was it just something that came up recently and you thought, let me start writing something?
Well, I moved to Los Angeles right after undergraduate college. And my goal was to write Tarzan movies or Edgar Rice Burroughs movies eventually, my ultimate goal. Yeah. So I started out writing for the movie magazines, Cinefantastique, Femme Fatale, Film Facts. And whenever there was a Burroughs project, I would cover that, or a Mars project, or anything having to do with this arena. And so that's sort of how I learned and cut my teeth. And it was sort of like film school, because I was interviewing, directors and producers and screenwriters and actors. So it was really a great chance to get a knowledge of the film industry and how it worked. And, I just sort of built this, knowledge base. In '97, I wanted to do this book, a book similar to Tarzan on film when the Disney movie was coming out. Wow. So that's when I started researching. And Disney basically only wanted to publish books about their product, Disney product, and that's fine. So I just kept researching. For 20 years, I kept compiling the data, reading old magazine articles and newspaper articles and doing online searches. Now, there's so much material online that I was able to go into the old newspaper databases of the LA Times and other newspapers and really compile this information. And yeah, it was sort of the dream to do, I think it was back in 93 or 94, I wrote in one of the fanzines, why has there never been a Tarzan coffee table book? This is a book the world needs. Yeah. They say if you want a book and you can't find it and it doesn't exist, write it yourself. Wow, so that was sort of an ongoing thing of compiling all this material and trying to become, knowledgeable in the field. And so when the centennial came around in 2012, I made the pitch to ERB Inc. and Titan Books. I am fortunate that Titan Books saw that felt that I was the perfect person to write this book. It was successful enough that they asked me to write a second book, and that was Tarzan on film. Nick Landau, the president of Titan, felt that the marketplace was ripe for a Tarzan on film book. Of course, Gabe Esso's Tarzan of the Movies. That's a great book. Yeah. It was the leader in the field for many years. I love that book. Yeah. But it came out in the late 60s, early 70s. So there was a lot more Tarzan Tarzan lore that's come out in the last 40 years. So I was happy to write this book, and I'm really happy with the reception it's gotten.
At least, yeah, that's fantastic. And if you look at the 24 novels of Edgar Rice Burroughs, do you have a favorite book for you that stands out, or do you love them all?
Absolutely, Tarzan of the Apes. I think it is Edgar Rice Burroughs' best novel. I think he sort of hit his peak with that novel because he was still writing for himself. You know, they say as an author, you can't, if you want to create art, you can't do it for someone else. You have to do it for yourself. It has to come from the heart. Yeah. And Tarzan was such a huge commercial success that now he had an audience and he was writing for the audience. So I love all the books. I love everything he wrote. But I think that Tarzan of the Apes was just sort of this apex of his talents. You know, and there's some other very good things. The Apache novels are excellent because that life in the Arizona desert, and he knew the Apache. And so I think those are wonderful novels. He had some others that were just terrific. But Tarzan of the Apes, going beyond Tarzan, you know, I love Lost Worlds. I love Lost Civilizations. Tarzan the Terrible is probably my second favorite novel because it's got dinosaurs in it. And, you know, this Lost World. And then, you know, beyond that, it's hard to pick because there's so many wonderful books. I can read and reread them over and over, every one of them, and just, you know, enjoy them every time.
Yeah, there's so many situations and characters, and like you said, different worlds of all the Earth books and also in the Tarzan books. But I think, like you said, you gain so much information and knowledge. You're almost like a walking dictionary or a walking library. Do you ever consider writing novels yourself, like continuing with Tarzan novels?
That's a crowded field. There are a lot of guys writing it. You know, Will Murray's doing a great job. Gary Buckingham has got some excellent, couple of excellent books out right now. So it's a crowded field, and there's a lot of people doing it. And, you know, never say never. Maybe someday I'll write some Burroughs fiction. But right now, I'm really interested in the nonfiction, and I would love, you know, to put together film and TV deals with these characters. You know, I get inquiries from Hollywood people on a regular basis about this, and hopefully the day will come when we can put something together, because I would love to be involved in that aspect of it. You know, not just Tarzan, but the other properties. John Carter, that's ripe for a reboot.
Totally.
There's some other great properties they have that should be on the screen. You know, Tarzan and John Carter, that's all people know about Burroughs, but he had 80 novels, you know, and probably about 25 different scenarios, 25 different worlds and things to explore. So there's a tremendous amount out there to bring to the world in a visual format.
Yeah, there's almost too many. I don't think we're gonna be still alive when all those things can be filmed and put on TV or streaming, or, you know, the list goes on and on. So
well, you know, look at Marvel and what they're doing. Characters that are obscure. You know, I grew up like everyone in America. You know, we were familiar with Batman and the Marvel universe, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four. I read Fantastic Four when I was a kid, and you know, I thought I was fairly up on the major heroes, but they've got so many heroes and storylines coming out. So you know, I think the potential is there for Edgar Rice Burroughs. You'd have to get one big winning movie though. You know, that's what it's going to take, is one movie to break through the consciousness in Hollywood to say, okay, this guy makes money. And that movie may be Tarzan, it may be John Carter, but you know, there's got to be a breakthrough movie in today's climate.
You have to get that standard, because they keep making movies, but somehow it just doesn't get through to the main market, you know. Like, I agree.
Yeah, it was sad what happened with John Carter, because it was a well-made movie. Certainly they didn't spare the budget, and you know, it just didn't click, you know, and there are a lot of people who want to blame the studio or the marketing, and you know, similar thing with the Legend of Tarzan. It certainly, you know, it was a well-made movie. You know, it did all right at the box office. You know, it doubled its budget, but it just didn't catch on with the public. And you know, there wasn't any merchandising with it. It just kind of, the movie was just kind of dumped on the screens, and there wasn't a lot of buildup or you know, promotion around it. So hopefully that will change. They're both respectable movies, but you know, you have to go back to Disney's Tarzan for a movie that really caught the public's eye.
They did something right with the Disney movie, and it's like these days there's just something missing in the formula. Like you said, the film is well made, or the actor or whatever, but there's still something missing in the overall formula of the film, you know.
Well, there has to be a commitment from the studio to support this film in all platforms. You know, like I said, merchandising, media, getting interviews out there. There just weren't that many advanced interviews for either movie. They sort of kept a lid on it. And with John Carter, I think that you know, there was the idea that we're going to work in silence and then spring this great thing on the world. But other movies don't work that way. You know, you've got to get your actors out there talking. You've got to get film crews on set, behind the scenes. You've really got to do the build up for the movie to succeed. It takes a lot of investment before and after.
Yeah, totally. And then, yeah, talking about movies and comics, you mentioned Marvel and Batman. What do you think is the overall influence that, you know, comic heroes and superheroes has on the youth? I mean, the comic genre is actually a big part in everyday life these days.
Yeah, I mean, you know, DC and Marvel, they're both competing and putting out, you know, so much product, and it really does capture it. You know, I grew up on the pulp heroes. In addition to Edgar Rice Burroughs, who was head and shoulders my favorite. You know, I read Doc Savage. There was a Phantom movie that came out, The Rocketeer is a pulp style hero. You know, I'd love to see more pulp heroes on the screen. You know, Edgar Rice Burroughs, he wrote The Mucker. That's a great, well-rounded story. It's a character that that's based in the pulps. You know, Conan the Barbarian, Robert E. Howard. I think those stories are sort of underutilized in the media. We could see a lot more Robert E. Howard on screen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to sort of, you know, the costume superheroes sort of have a stranglehold on the American imagination, and I'd love to see a little more diversity in our film product.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think there's so much more to explore, you know, not only maybe one thing, but I think they have to reach out more in those different areas and fields, you know. So, but maybe in the future we will get something new and different on screen.
Well, you know, the thing about Hollywood is they want a proven moneymaker. And so that's the challenge in selling Edgar Rice Burroughs. If you want to make a Pellucidar film, I you know, was pitching an animated Pellucidar cartoon to an animated television executive a few years ago. And, you know, the first thing they ask is, okay, how much money has this product made in the past? Well, you can't quantify that. Yeah, there are millions of paperbacks out there. Everybody knows who it is, but there hasn't been a successful Pellucidar movie. You know, Marvel wants to say, you know, with Marvel, they can say all these different movies made this much money. So if we do a new character, we feel it's somewhat safe. But that's not always true. You know, we saw that from the DC side, the Batwoman or the Batgirl movie just got shelved.
Yeah,
it's a movie that there was some anticipation for. There's certainly recognition, but the studio just felt like the financial potential wasn't there. So that's the big hurdle in getting a Burroughs movie beyond Tarzan and John Carter, is they want to know what's the financial potential here.
Yeah.
You know, the other side of that is maybe you make a low budget Burroughs film with some of these properties that you know, that don't require you know, extensive special effects. That's the, you know, the thing about Burroughs is he wrote these fantastic scenarios, and that's going to be an expensive movie to make.
Yeah.
To do a Tarzan movie right, you know, you've got to have, you know, the stunts and the CGI and the, you know, the action and the adventure. Same thing with John Carter. You know, you've got a guy who's bouncing around, jumping across this planet and having these feats of strength. These are expensive movies to make, and that's the challenge.
Yeah, no, you have
I should say expensive movies to make right.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I got something just as a matter of interest, because you have so much knowledge, but it's just something that I've been thinking about myself, you know, regarding the characters in the Tarzan books and novels of Edgar Rice Burroughs. Well, it might not be the case. I'm just wondering your opinion. Let's just say in the first book you have obviously Tarzan and Jane, and then you have Cecil John Clayton, right? Clayton is most, Cecil John Clayton. Do you think the character, obviously Burroughs is not around anymore, but do you think that character was maybe inspired by Cecil John Rhodes, the British businessman? Because it's so
That's a good question. You know, I've never looked into that. I'd have to look into that to say. Burroughs did take a lot of inspiration from contemporary characters, from you know, what was going on in the news. He was very well versed in current affairs, current events. You know, a lot of his later books, you know, when Tarzan went to war against the Germans in World War I, when you know, Tarzan you know, defeated the communists and Joseph Stalin sent a hit squad after him. Tarzan fighting World War II. So Tarzan lived in this fantasy world, but there were times when Burroughs would sort of incorporate real world events. And you know, it's a mystery. Burroughs was always very close-lipped about his inspirations for Tarzan. He said it was Romulus and Remus when they really pressed him on the issue. But you know, and that was sort of his genius as a writer, is we can speculate all day long on what his inspirations were, but he wasn't talking, you know.
Yeah, no, it's a big secret. And also the second one is it's not that close, but you have those two, I think the two Russians, Polovich and Rokov, I don't know how you pronounce it. Polovich and Nicholas Rokov. Do you think Rokov might even be an abbreviation for Rockefeller? Rockefeller. Maybe.
Oh wow, that is a good question. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen anything, you know, when I worked for the company, I went through the Burroughs correspondence and his notes. And I've never seen anything indicating that Burroughs had any sort of awareness, shall we say, or antipathy for the Rockefellers. It's possible he saw the name, you know, it was just a name that he saw that resonated with him. You know, I've never seen where he got that name from. So it's possible, you know, anything's possible.
Yeah,
it's very interesting sleuthing on your part. And it's interesting, you bring a perspective that's outside of the American, the US. You know, we have our own biases. Any culture has their own biases.
Yeah.
And so anyone from the outside looking in on that culture, you see things we can't see. So that's very, intriguing lines of thought there.
Yeah, there's many things, because I've been reading the books also over and over. It's just sometimes I'm reading the book, obviously, and then there's some things that pop in my head, or like these names. Then it looks like there might be some kind of a connection or inspiration that he might have used, you know, like certain characters that actually lived in real time, and he maybe just changed a little bit of the dynamics of the name and the character. But it's interesting to me, you know, because there's so much angles that you, like you said, that you can look into this book, all the books actually.
Yeah. Now, in the later books, you know, in his later writing, Burroughs kept notebooks, and he would write everything down. He did a little bit with Tarzan, but he was a little bit more methodical in his later writing. I think he had to be, you know, to keep everything together with his worlds, with his universe. He had created this. And the interesting thing about, you know, Edgar Rice Burroughs is there were contradictions. You know, in the Mars books and the later books, he would contradict himself. And so you kind of have to, as a writer, choose, you know, where is Zodanga located? He located it in 2 different places on the planet. And there's a lot of fan speculation of how this might have been. Was the first Zodanga destroyed and they, you know, reestablished it somewhere else?
Yeah.
But yeah, he kept better notes in his later, and we know a little bit more about his inspirations on his later works. But there's a lot of mystery around Tarzan of the Apes and the conception and the whole fingerprinting. You know, fingerprinting had just come into play as a means of crime detection, and he incorporated that into the novel. So you know, like I said, a lot of his science and his theories were cutting edge for the time.
I think so. He was way ahead of his time. I mean, also like maybe the Queen of Opar. You say Queen Law? Queen Law, right?
Yes.
Do you think Queen Law? I think one of the Egyptian sun god is Ra with an R. Maybe Queen Ra.
You know, that's interesting. You know, that's something. You know, I wrote a Sunday comic strip for Tarzan. I was auditioning to be the regular writer for that role, and I wrote an Opar story. And in the story, the Oparians are chanting to the sun god, and I have them chanting Ra, Ra, Ra.
Okay.
That was something I thought that maybe they were influenced by Egyptian, would be influenced by the Egyptian mythos. And, you know, and that it came down, you know, Burroughs told us later on that they were Atlanteans. They were from Atlantis.
Yeah.
But, you know, they were, of course, you know, at the time, if Atlantis existed, would it have traded with Egypt? What other civilizations of the time? I think maybe some influence. I think his big influence was probably H. Rider Haggard and Ayesha. Certainly Law is a very similar character to that. again, Burroughs never let on that he was influenced by Haggard. So it's a lot of speculation. But I read Haggard as a kid too, and I saw a lot of parallels in that lost civilization of core.
Yeah, it's such a vast knowledge, because it wasn't like today, Google or all these internet things. I mean, you had to either talk to someone or you have to read it somewhere, and to have all this vast knowledge of planets and of the Earth, and different countries and locations and peoples and cultures, unbelievable.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, well, a lot of people probably knows it, but talking about superheroes, he was also probably, I guess, the inspiration for the Superman character. I think the creators mentioned that Burroughs Tarzan was inspiration by creating Superman or something.
Yeah, well, Superman was probably more influenced by John Carter, and the early Superman, it was a similar thing. It was someone from a planet with heavier gravity who comes here. He didn't fly originally. It was, he leaped tall buildings in a single bound. He had the jumping and the strength and the various things, and then they sort of built that up with the yellow sun and everything.
Yeah.
But definitely John Carter, and I think the heroic aspects came from Tarzan. One little interesting thing that I never realized was an absolute, the creators, I later found out the creators contributed to this, is Superman has that little curl on his forehead, the spit curl.
Okay.
That was from Johnny Weissmuller's Tarzan, because Tarzan always had a little curl hanging down, and they were influenced by that. So the little curl in front of his head is definitely from MGM's Tarzan, Johnny Weissmuller.
That's very interesting.
Because I think Burroughs in many of the books he wrote, or he mentioned Tarzan. I know it's mostly from John Carter, but I remember in the books he says whatever Tarzan is like a Superman. The two words Superman. So there was mentions of that before the Superman character came about.
Yes. Possibly. I mean, we know Siegel and Schuster were well versed in Edgar Rice Burroughs and the whole heroic thing. So I know they like I said, they did appropriate elements of Tarzan and John Carter, and that whole heroic mythos. And of course, a lot of the superheroes are now third generation. You have a character like Doc Savage, who was directly influenced. Lester Dent said Doc Savage was a combination of Tarzan, Sherlock Holmes, and I forget the other character.
Okay.
And then Doc Savage influenced people. Doc Savage was a big influence on Batman with the utility belt and the fact that he wouldn't use a gun. So there are a lot of third generation influences. And of course, Batman was also influenced by Tarzan. The early Batman comics were influenced by Hal Foster's Tarzan. So, you have a lot of both first generation, second generation, third generation that Burroughs has influenced these characters, and people may not even recognize it because
no connection.
They don't.
Quite away. One thing.
That's right. If you try, if you trace it back so much, and so many of the, the science fiction writers, Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Ray Bradbury and all the great science fiction writers were directly influenced by Burroughs.
Yeah.
And look at the people they've influenced again, who might not know that Burroughs was the original. And that was the problem with John Carter, is people who weren't in the know said, "Oh, these guys are copying Star Wars." Well, no, it's the other way around.
Yeah, it's always vice versa. And I think even like I think Arnold Schwarzenegger also said that he was, as a child, he watched the Johnny Weissmuller movies. He probably was already back then was looking on TV saying, "Come on, Tarzan, let's get out of here, get to the Tarzan."
Yeah, he was a big fan of Johnny Weissmuller's Tarzan. He said that in his in some of his biographies, autobiographies. He would go to the movies and watch the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan films, and that was one of the major inspirations for his getting into physical culture. Tarzan has been a huge inspiration again in the physical culture movement and the bodybuilder. Look at all the guys who were fans who got into that. Present company not accepted. That Tarzan inspired people to be the best they could be, and that's physically, mentally, morally. He just has that hold, especially on men. He just grabs us and he makes us want to be the best we can be, the most we can be.
Yeah, that's well said. He's like the father of the nation or something. Yeah.
Yes.
So do you have a favorite Tarzan actor which played all the previous films?
I like them all, and I can appreciate the movies for what they were. A lot of Tarzan fans don't like the movies. They feel like this isn't the real Tarzan. I see them as a separate thing. They sold Tarzan books. They introduced people to Edgar Rice Burroughs. In that respect, they're great. They financed Edgar Rice Burroughs. He was making a lot more money off the movies than he was the books.
Yeah.
And So, I like everyone's, I like Weissmuller. I have tremendous admiration for Ron Ely and what he did, doing his own stunts, wrestling lions and tigers and birds. Just amazing, and all those guys, Gene Pollard, he wrestled lions. Here's a guy who was a fireman, and they hire him, they bring him on set, they pay him $100 a week, and they say, you got to wrestle these lions. And he stepped in and he did it, and the producer like, this guy will do anything, So yeah, I have tremendous admiration for all of these guys, really. And they suffered, Ron Ely, tremendous injuries that affected him all of his life, separated both shoulders, falling off vines and other things. And you can imagine how they are when they get old. Herman Briggs, he got a knee injury. His knee swelled up like a cantaloupe. They had to evacuate him on a boat down the river to a doctor to lance his knee. And he was back on set the next day limping, but he showed me the scar. Guy was 97 years old when I interviewed him, and he could show me scars from playing Tarzan. And so it's really a commitment, and I have tremendous admiration for all of them, and I enjoy all the movies. They're a lot of them are very, very well done. It's not Burroughs Tarzan. It's not Edgar Rice Burroughs Tarzan. I know that. I understand that, and I don't go in expecting that. You're going to get something else. But we all dream of the day Edgar Rice Burroughs Tarzan is going to be on screen.
It's like each actor is bringing his own sort of speciality to the screen, portraying the character. So that's always like,
yes. I mean, I like the Tarzans that actually speak English, and Ron Ely, Herman Briggs. I prefer an educated Tarzan, but at the same time, the Johnny Weissmuller movies were great. I love the MGM, the first two. I like the RKO where he finds the lost civilizations, the Amazons, the leopard woman. Those are great because I love the exoticism of them. So, but my preference would be to see an educated, intelligent Tarzan on screen.
Hopefully one day.
Among dinosaurs.
The dinosaurs.
Yeah, that's one thing that I don't think translates, and again, I like, Wolf Larson as a person. I think he's a great guy. I think he was great physically as a Tarzan, but they had him speaking the Johnny Weissmuller thing, and I don't think that works in today's society. It maybe in Weissmuller's time he came across as an innocent, this guy who was uncorrupted, but today I don't think it translates. I think for it to resonate today, Tarzan needs to be learned and speak English. You've got to get him past the point where he's learned that.
Become civilized. Up in
Right.
the way. There's a question, Scott. Obviously, your involvement with the conventions and some of the other Tarzan gatherings. How's it going with the Palm Springs Star? You were involved in establishing the Star and the Walk of Fame.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Everyone knows about the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I think I hope they do overseas. This was started by Hollywood in 1960. They thought we need to do something as a tourist attraction and to commemorate the actors. They put, I think it was 1,588 stars in the sidewalk.
Yes.
And Elmo Lincoln got a star. Johnny Weissmuller got a star. I believe Buster Crabbe. I believe all three of those were some of the original stars. Those are the three Tarzans that have stars. And they add stars over the year. It's very expensive and it's very competitive to get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I understand right now the cost is $55,000, and whoever submits for the star and gets it, they have to bear that cost.
Okay.
We've lobbied for Edgar Rice Burroughs to get a star. I mean, here's a man who is responsible for 60 feature films that have generated billions of dollars worldwide, and he's just kind of forgotten. So I was in Palm Springs walking along, and they have their own Walk of Fame for people who lived in Palm Springs, who had an influence there. And I thought, Edgar Rice Burroughs should have a star. So, and this was back around 2016, that this started. And the Burroughs family, Linda Burroughs, wrote a letter and was, who's Burroughs' granddaughter-in-law, and in support. You have to get the support of the family if it's a deceased celebrity. And she was wonderful in writing a letter. We got the star. We were awarded it. We're running a GoFundMe campaign. It's only $15,000, so that's a bargain. Palm Springs has, I think, like 14.9 million visitors a year. So that's going to be about 15 million people a year who will see Edgar Rice Burroughs' name in a big star. And some of them will go, oh, yeah, that guy. A lot of them will say, who's Edgar Rice Burroughs? And Palm Springs has their guides, and, they'll have their listing of who these people were and why they're important and famous. And So it's an opportunity to get Edgar Rice Burroughs' name out in front of a lot of people.
Yeah, totally.
And our GoFundMe Kickstarter campaign, we're at about 13,500. We're over 90% funded. The campaign is a star for ERB on GoFundMe. If you want to look it up, anybody wants to donate, we certainly would appreciate it. Your name will go, the donors' names will go on the honor roll of donors, which will be published for the people who supported it. Right now, I think we're at 99 donors. We've reached 90% with only 99 donors.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're going to have this ceremony. It'll be announced Edgar Rice Burroughs Day in Palm Springs next spring, hopefully in March. If you guys are in Hollywood, we hope you'll be there and join us.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big celebration, and it's going to put Edgar Rice Burroughs' name front and center in that community for a while. And yeah, it's just been a tremendous opportunity. I'm honored to be involved with it, and I'm thankful to the Burroughs family for their support.
Yeah, they are fantastic. It's a great initiative that you started, and yeah, congrats on all that.
Thank you.
And also, you've been traveling across the states, across the nation. I believe there's a Tarzan place in Texas as well. What was that all about?
Tarzan, Texas. Tarzan actually predated Tarzana, California, in terms of incorporation.
Okay.
Actually, I don't think it's incorporated, but Tarzana, the ranch, was existed, but Tarzana, California, was established in 1928. Tarzan, Texas, was established in 1927. The postmaster was asked for a list of names of what would be a good name for this little unincorporated community. He submitted Tarzan, and it was picked. Right now, there are 2 churches and a gas station, convenience store, restaurant there. So as I travel cross country to see my family, I would drive during COVID. And I've been to Tarzan, Texas 8 times in the last 2.5 years. I think that must be a record for a Burroughs fan, for someone who's just going to see. And I've watched it. You know, they tore down the restaurant and they've rebuilt it, you know, bigger and nicer. So there's been change and progress in Tarzan, Texas, and you know, it's only a few hundred people there. A lot of cotton fields and oil fields and stuff, but it's a fun part of my journey. I always try to stop by and take a few photos.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. There's so many Tarzan or Tarzana communities. Maybe they should start like a franchise, like McDonald's. You have California, Texas, Europe, Australia.
Yes. Well, what I'd love to do is do like a sister city thing and have some people from Tarzan, Texas visit Tarzana, and have Tarzana people visit Tarzan, Texas.
Okay.
And like a cultural exchange.
Yeah, exchange students.
That would be fun.
That sounds interesting. That's very nice.
Yeah, I'll definitely join that program.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just so do you have any plans? What is the future for you for Tarzan? Do you have any books in mind? You yourself want to write something, a novel or a screenplay? What's on your bucket list?
There's some movies I'd like to develop. There are a few roadblocks at the moment that are preventing me from developing those. I came very close when I worked at ERB Inc. to getting some projects in production. Hopefully those roadblocks will be resolved, and we'll get some Burroughs projects in production. In terms of writing, I would love to do the Tarzan the Centennial Celebration treatment with everything else. John Carter, Venus, Pellucidar. I'd love to do a big coffee table book of those characters.
Yeah.
My publisher said, you know, we need to have a movie or something to support this. There needs to be, these characters need to be a little bigger in the public eye for such a book to get maximum exposure. So that's the dream, is to do that book someday. And I continue to research. There's a lot. I've got enough material for numerous. I could write several more books on Tarzan on film and the actors in it. Just a lot of material. You know, there's 110 years worth of material to be brought to a new audience. So you know, it's I know. I wish I could clone me. I wish I had a office full of assistants who could help me get my work and, you know, polish it and get it out there. You know, that's the thing is, you know, what is the thing? Perfection is the enemy of whatever that saying. You know, you keep finding things, and just as you get ready to publish, oh well, I find another source that tells me more information, and you know, my opinion's changing, you know, and we learn more, you know. You know, we learned that some things in the Tarzan movies were myths, and they got you know, spread. They went viral, like the monkeys down in Florida that people say were from a Tarzan movie. Well, this was a guy who wanted to you know, create a tourist attraction, and they just happened to be there, and they filmed Tarzan movies down there, but they're not escaped Tarzan monkeys.
Yeah, the mythology, Mythbusters. Okay, just yeah, just finally, what do you think? What do you think? I mean, I think you touched on it, but what do you think is the secret behind Tarzan? Why does the legacy keep growing after 100 years, 200 years, 300 years? Why does Tarzan or Edgar Rice Burroughs works? How come it keeps increasing and it's just never ending?
Well, I think Edgar Rice Burroughs was a creative genius. You know, I think he was brilliant. I think he knew what he was doing. He grew up reading the, you know, as a child when he was in school, they read Latin and Greek, and he grew up reading the original stories of Romulus and Remus, you know, Hercules. So he was well versed in sort of the heroic mythic structure. He knew how to tell a story because it had been imbued in him from sources, you know, 2,000 years old. So I think that was it, that he had this grasp of, you know, Joseph Campbell calls it the journey of the hero, the hero's journey. And I think his works are all imbued with that. And it's something that crosses time. You know, it's timeless. You know, his works are timeless. Once you get into the story, you forget you're in the 21st century. It could be any time. Tarzan can happen at any time. And I think that was the secret, was he just knew how to tell a story that would reach the maximum audience.
That's well said, yeah.
Yeah, a great imagination. I mean, like you said earlier, that we need big budgets to tell these stories.
Yeah, it's way out there.
Yes.
Okay, Scott, thanks a lot for being on the show. I just want to say that we're going to send you a custom-made certificate and also a trophy for being a special guest on the show. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. It's always a pleasure to talk Edgar Rice Burroughs and Tarzan. And, you know, I appreciate both of your enthusiasm and your passion. I think you're doing great work there in South Africa. I look forward to the day when you're back in Southern California and you're you know, bringing that passion to Hollywood.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We're gonna do our utmost best, and we plan to be either next month or the month after back in LA.
Yeah. And thank you so much also, Scott, for your input for the old Tarzan legacy, like the Palm Springs Star and, you know, the books, the comics, and your input. So we really appreciate it. Yeah, it's always fascinating looking at your stuff.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. You know, like I said, I've formed tremendous friendships through my association with Edgar Rice Burroughs and Tarzan. Lifelong friendships, people, you know, whose friendship I treasure, just like you guys. And it's been a wonderful ride, and I look forward to continuing this ride for many years to come.
Yeah, I agree on that one. Thanks a lot, Scott. Have a nice day, and we'll chat soon again.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Have a good night.
Yeah, bye.